USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, January 31st, 2024. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. Big matchups over the weekend between BC and BU, home and home, and the Beanpot coming up have a lot of eyes turned toward Hockey East.
And joining us on USCHO Spotlight, a good friend of mine, a partner of mine in many ways on the Hockey East Games of the Week on NESN, Tyler Murray, one of the lead voices on that network. Tyler, you got to call arguably the biggest series that's been played in probably 4 years. Number one, Boston University. Number two, Boston College at the time. They've now switched spots a little bit. But how great was it to be on that broadcast for 2 nights?
It was phenomenal. And Jimmy and Ed, thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, one of those games you feel lucky to be in the building, let alone being able to broadcast it with my main man, Jim Connelly. But man, did BC just jump off the page in so many different ways? I don't think BU played terribly. Jay Pandolfo kind of said we were okay, could have been better. But just the theme of the week leading up to it was both coaches said we can't give the other guys any kind of opportunities. They'll make us pay. It was BC who kept cashing in on the clutch opportunities, whether it was freshmen or I guess you can call him a veteran, Cutter Gauthier, just in year 2. A lot of their high-end skill for BC, that really made the difference.
Did you notice as much, you kind of hit on that, the 100-foot game, you know, hockey's a 200-foot game, but when you turn the puck over at center ice, it becomes a shorter game. And I felt like BC, the ability to capitalize, but you don't see it that often. You don't realize how quick BC can counterattack. And maybe it wasn't 100-foot pass, maybe it was 150-foot that they had to go from one end to the other, but they were really jumping on every mistake, and especially that freshman line, their passing ability, the ability to make a team pay. It stood out.
I think the perfect example is BU. I think they had about a 4-on-2 breakout with a chance to tie. Jacob Fowler, who was an absolute star, makes a huge kick save. He kicks it so hard it goes to the blue line right into Will Smith's grasp. He's off and running 2-on-1 with Jakob Bankston. They play give and go, and he rips one home from the circle. And at that point, it's essentially over. It does prove to be the game-winning goal. But you're just going from, all right, BU might tie it, to this game is over in the blink of an eye. And that's exactly the kind of speed and skill that BC brings. And BU can match it almost every line, but I think maybe you saw BC show just a little bit of separation on the high end and how much depth they tend to have in that top 6.
It was pretty impressive. I want to ask you more because you see this league night in, night out. We were talking before we got on the broadcast about Maine, obviously a very impressive team that, we might not have seen enough of at this point. Those that watch the league, those that watch nationally, even, you haven't seen a ton of the Maine Black Bears, but they are really a team. They're different than maybe 3-4 years ago. They're certainly different than even a year ago. What do you like about this Maine team?
It was funny. We were talking to UMass coach Greg Carville this week, and he's, of course, admired what his former protege Ben Barr has done, taking over his first head coach job. Carville's quote was, yeah, Ben Barr's doing what we did in Amherst. He got a first-round pick, and he's making the most of it. So Greg Carville, of course, for UMass, and then the Nadeaus, Bradley and Josh for Maine. It's a matter of the structure and culture that Ben Barr has been able to implement there so quickly, and then you get that high-end skill. I mean, how many times when we did a Maine game did we say, man, that Lyndon Breen guy is really, really good, but he's carrying such a heavy load. If you lock him down, is there an opportunity to beat Maine even in that tough barn? And a lot of times, yeah, that was the case. But now Lyndon Breen's on a line with these two Nadeau brothers who seem to know where their counterparts are. It kind of feels a little bit like that BC line where you have the Team USA kids who just know where each other are going to be because they've played each other for so long. So you have a mistake-free, deep, talented team that does have that high-end scoring in Maine. And because they've got 3 games in hand on BC, 4 games in hand on BU, and they haven't lost a home game all year, They might be the sleeping giant right now in hockey, sitting right in that third spot. Everyone looking at BU and BC. Maine doesn't have to play those two teams anymore. It's never easy in Hockey East, but they have, I don't want to call it a favorable schedule, but there's an opportunity for Maine to really keep creeping up on those two Boston teams.
I guess that's where I wanted to go with the next question. Do you feel like it is now a 3-horse race? Is it only Maine, BC, and BU at this point?
Only because I have so much respect for Providence. I want to keep them in that conversation, and UMass as well. I mean, when UMass is clicking, they've got a record number of NHL draft picks. If Michael Hrabal is at his best, I think he's as tough as any goaltender in Hockey East, even just as a freshman. But remember, Providence, they were the team that knocked BC out of the number one spot just a few weeks ago. It was a home win for Providence, but they were trailing BC in the third period. That's usually a done deal this year, even for the top teams in the country. They come back to win that game over the Eagles, and I think that's something they can hang their hat on for a while. We've seen Alaska do this the last couple of years. A lot of Hockey East teams, you beat Alaska on the first night, then you think, okay, we're good to go, and then Anchorage just comes back and gives you a tough second night. So that wasn't a good moment for Providence, but I think that's just a speed bump. So don't count out Providence. They're tied right now with UMass entering the weekend anyway at number 10 in the pairwise. So I'm still very much excited about those two teams. But sure, if you say there's a top three and it's BC, BU, and Maine, I got no problem with that either.
And the Hockey East standings are pretty deceiving if you first look at them without looking at how many games teams have played. You have both UMass and New Hampshire still within striking distance of home ice because they've got 4 games in hand each. What about those teams, not so much in the national picture, but UMass and New Hampshire playing into getting into the top part of Hockey East down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean, and Northeastern, after upsetting BU, they're not that far away from getting into that same conversation after a nightmare start. But UConn, had they pulled off an upset in Connecticut ice over Quinnipiac, they're back in the pairwise conversation. They wind up losing 4-3. But UNH has been so fascinating this year because, as you guys know, you can ride an early season upset in the pairwise for a while. They got 2 of them, BU and Quinnipiac, back in October. And even though they're playing about 500 hockey the last couple of weeks, UNH is still right on that bubble. The issue is they've been dominating in shots lately, but it hasn't translated into wins. That UNH ran into really hot goaltending against UConn and Vermont, where they doubled up Vermont in shots but lost. Then they outshot UConn by 20 and lost. And yeah, you probably outplayed the opposition, but you're coming away with 2 wins and 2 losses. And the pairwise just does not care about how well you shot that day. So keeping an eye on UNH, obviously. They can right all those wrongs if they can upset BU again. But could be a tough spot, of course, with the Terriers hungry to snap a 3-game losing streak all of a sudden when BU entered that streak with only 4 losses all year.
Now let's talk a little bit about BU. Are they licking their wounds a little bit? And, first you lose to BC. You expect those are going to be tough. But then overtime loss last night to Northeastern. They're going to face BC again in the first round of the Beanpot on Monday. I expect to see a BU team that comes out pretty hungry. What do you look forward to in that matchup in the Garden?
I mean, any matchup you put together in the Garden, I'm looking forward to it, Ed. But just to have BU and BC, the primetime game on Beanpot Monday, it should be a civic holiday, but that's okay. We'll work on that. I think it's a matter of, can you kind of get it out of your head that, man, we played okay, but BC still got us. The 3 posts, and even later in the third period on Friday, a couple of missed opportunities that could have tied a 2-1 game that winds up being a 4-1 loss with a couple of empty net goals. Can you just kind of shake it off that, yeah, BC has had our number so far this year? And I think they can. A lot of ice time, as has been well documented for Lane Hudson. Can they maybe, with this pretty heavy, busy schedule lately, can they manage that at all on Friday against UNH? Do they care to manage that against UNH because he's one of the best 2-way blue liners in the country? I'm not sure, but it was good to see Macklin Celebrini get back in the goal column on the power play on Tuesday against Northeastern. That was a big goal as they came back from 2 goals down. He really didn't have many opportunities being watched by Cutter Gauthier all weekend, who really broke out in a defensive way for Boston College. So let's see if Celebrini can build some momentum because they need him. I mean, he's 17 years old. He's the youngest player in college hockey. You don't want to have to rely on a kid, essentially. But look, I mean, he's the reason people have BU still as one of the very best teams in the country. So a 1-point weekend against BC, disappointing for him. Look for him to bounce back, I think, in a big way and a really big stage at TD Garden.
And you can't look past teams. BC has a kind of a down year for Lowell, but they have Lowell coming up on Friday, and can't look past the Riverhawks.
That's the truth. That's the definition of what Hockey East has always been, but especially this year. If you overlook a team, they're going to make you pay. And UMass Lowell is the ultimate team that you cannot overlook. It's one big win could really turn things around for you. Maybe that's what Norm Bazin has in mind for his team this weekend.
More with NESN broadcaster Tyler Murray in a moment. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th, 2024 at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
Back with Tyler Murray. The crowds home and home this past weekend were absolutely spectacular. You were right immersed in the environment, just watching it. We could see it. And it seems like attendance nationally is up and interest in the college hockey game is up. We've seen the impact of the World Juniors and mentioning all the college players there. This is going to be a softball because I'm teeing it up for you, but aren't we in kind of a golden age of college hockey right now?
I can't disagree. It's been phenomenal. And for Boston College, our guy, Eric Galante, does such a great job calling their games at Connie Forum. He keeps reminding us that the last time BC was number one with Spencer Knight and Alex Newhook, no fans were allowed in the building. So you could say there's a buildup, a carryover from how exciting that team was to how maybe even more exciting this team is. And having fans who lined up, what was it, Jimmy? 1 o'clock, the students were lining up outside Connie Forum to get in for a 7 o'clock game. I have not seen anything like that in a long time for college hockey. So really impressed by BC's fans. And then Aganis gets sold out the very next day. And it was a tough one for those fans to get into because BC went up 2-0 in the first half of the first period. But once it got close down the stretch, they were going nuts. And not even to mention in a couple of weeks, we're going to get the border battle, UNH against Maine, which some people think might be the craziest crowds you could possibly have in Hockey East. So, yes, it makes our job very easy. It makes it a lot of fun because you let the game do the talking, you let the fans do the talking, and they're doing a whole lot of it this year.
And I guess that UNH Maine series has been sold out for weeks.
That's right.
I think they were talking about it being sold out when Maine was in the Ledger Bank Classic at the end of December. One more question I got to ask you. Hockey East, single elimination throughout. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What are the arguments on that one?
Well, the arguments from people in our position is, well, you get paid per game, so 3-game quarterfinal series isn't the worst thing.
Would have been so much better, right?
But no, I absolutely love that every team gets in and that it's single elimination. And I know that you could argue it delegitimizes the regular season if every team's getting in, but no, everyone is fighting, I think, more than anything for a bye out of that first round. So you only have to play one game, and it's at home for the top 4 teams to get to the Garden when anything can happen. And remember, Ed, Hockey East is the only college hockey conference in the country that hosts a semifinal and championship on an NHL sheet and an NHL rink. It's really, really special in Hockey East. And it's a good example this year. I mean, the slow start for Northeastern, last year's slow start for UNH. Those two teams were on the doorstep of getting to the Garden because they had the carrot at the end of the year. Hey, if we get hot at the right time, we're right in it. And it keeps a team like BU, who starts red hot, it keeps them honest. You don't want to fall too far behind because no one's just going to let you run away with this regular season. So I think it's phenomenal. It's 11 teams loaded with talent, and I think they all deserve to have a crack at playing on an NHL rink at the end of the year.
I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here. This is the question. We know BC, BU, and Maine all probably make the tournament. So we now have Providence, we now have UMass, and we have UNH as teams that have been around that pairwise bubble all season long. I'm not going to say that one has to miss it But if one had to miss it, do you have one team that you think might be heading in that direction? Obviously, UNH is on the wrong side of the pairwise ledger right now. But is that your team? Do you feel like when you look at other schedules, there's one team that has the tougher schedule that might get compromised?
Yeah, you hit on it. It probably is UNH, if nothing else, just because of that schedule. BU's coming up. Then they have Boston College 3 times, guys. And I don't care if you're the Anaheim Ducks this year. BC is going to be a tough team to beat. Okay, they are really good. They got Maine in 2 games. They're at home, of course. Those sellouts we talked about. So you don't hate that. But the home and home with UMass, and then the end of the season with the home and home against Lowell, who, as we keep saying, gives everybody a tough game. But I mean, yeah, they have to play Boston College 3 more times down the stretch. So if you're going on schedule alone, it's an uphill battle for UNH, no question. But they have earned the right to be in the conversation because of what a great year this has been for the Wildcats. Their fans should be stoked. I know they are because they're packing the place every night.
I will give you one more tough dark horse question. A team that might not get a first round bye, and it could be UNH at this point. It could be a lot of teams at this point, but a team that might not get a first round bye that still might make the Garden.
Ooh, that's a very good one. I'm really impressed with what Steve Weidler has done in a quick transition to lead the Vermont Catamounts. They're always a tough out. But right now, if Northeastern stays as one of those teams who has to play in the first round, I mean, look, how many other teams have beat BU and BC this year, Jimmy? They might be the only one. So yeah, Jerry Keefe, he always seems to find a way. I mean, he was a part of that Jim Madigan coaching staff where, I mean, they got off to one of their worst starts ever. They finished with one of their best finishes ever. They know how to flip a switch. Everyone was kind of waiting for Northeastern to finally get healthy. No one thinks that Devin Levi can just be copy-pasted into a Cameron Whitehead, but some of the plays he made last night, Cameron Whitehead starting to prove that he very much belongs in that kind of that long resume of great goaltending they've had at Matthews Arena. So, yeah, I mean, if Northeastern has 2 wins all year, but they're against BU and BC, yeah, sure, they're a dark horse for me.
Yes, you are predictable. I could have predicted that was going to be. That's good. That's good. I mean, we're on the same page. Tyler Murray, we appreciate every time you come on. We always have a good conversation about Hockey East, but thank you and enjoy the rest of the season. There's a lot of great hockey left to be played in Hockey East.
I can't wait to see you at a rink very soon, Jim. Have a great call on Friday, and thanks a lot for the time, guys.
That's Tyler Murray from NESN. Jim, what an exciting race it's going to be down to the finish in Hockey East. A deceiving one, as I mentioned, with some teams with 4 games in hand. BC, BU, Northeastern get a couple of weeks where they've got the Beanpot. But this really looks like about half the teams in the league can still vie for the top spot.
I think that's actually true in terms of math. I think in terms of who will fight for it, I think the conversation we had about BC, BU, and Maine, those are probably the 3 teams that are really in the race. I do think the race is, that race to get to top 4 and get the bye. Well, top 5 to get the bye, top 4 to get home ice in the second round. And then that race to get, somewhere not in the bottom 3 spots. So you get that home ice spot in the first round. That those 6, 7, 8 will be really critical spots, and I think that's where you have to think about those games as very meaningful, because if you get through those games at home, say that you're the number 6 seed, you get through it at home, then you go to play the number 3 seed, and there's not a lot of difference between the number 3 and the number 6. So if you get to win a game at home as the number 6 seed and then advance, that's you probably feel good about yourself. You probably feel like you played a playoff game. You're a little bit more weathered, I guess is the word, and that you've gotten into that environment a little bit more. That I think one of the hardest things is sustaining that bye and then coming out energized in the first game, the first period of the first game. So I think that's one of the most difficult things ever in these tournaments where you have some buys, especially when you go down to single elimination.
People who market college hockey have got to be happy to see Boston College and Boston University back near the top. Right now, if the top 4 made the Frozen Four, it'd be BC, North Dakota, BU, and Wisconsin, with Maine, Denver, and Michigan State on the outside looking in, but very close behind. It feels like the good old days have come back in a way.
Oh, so much. And I'm not saying that I love it. I really enjoyed the days of when we didn't see the traditional teams in the Frozen Four. And it was okay. Seeing a team like Quinnipiac, seeing Union there, seeing Yale there, and seeing them all win national championships was very special. But there is something to be said about having, Michigan State, maybe BU, BC, Maine, Wisconsin, North Dakota, all those teams that are brand names. They're the part of college hockey everyone knows. Those are the teams we want to see. And I left out Minnesota. How did I leave out Minnesota and all of that? All of those teams, those 8 all should be, it feels like they should always be in a Frozen Four. But that's why we play the game. The parity in this game is a lot of fun. We're now just returning to maybe the days of old a little bit.
This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your seats. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Spotlight.